And I'll never forget it. It was the first day. I was in a year three classroom in front of 37-year-old kids. And about half an hour into my first day, I thought, I don't want to be a teacher.
Brian Keane, once a fed-up primary school teacher who followed his dreams in becoming an online fitness coach.
And for me, it's so funny because I get asked this question on podcasts. Did you think it would be the way it is now? Not even close. And I'd love to be like, I was a visionary. I knew I'd have the social media and the podcasts and the books. And yeah, I had this planned out. I didn't. I just didn't want to go back feckin' teaching. A lot of personal trainers make this mistake. Because something works for you, you tend to do the same thing with your clients.
Right. Yeah.
That's a big thing with personal trainers.
If you can give us as best as possible the tangible steps, formulas into why you versus so many other personal trainers or people with online businesses have got to where you have, what would you say some of the parts of the formula are?
The biggest secret, before I get into the framework, was
Brian, a massive welcome to the Success School podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. I really appreciate you doing this, and there's so much I want to ask you about. I think we'll just dive straight in with just a little bit of a backstory, really, for those who don't already know who you are. Do you want to just tell us what it was that got you into fitness? I believe was you a teacher in a primary school for 4 years?
great one to kick us off, Matt. And yeah, super excited to chat. I was a primary school teacher. That was actually my quote unquote, what I call my real job. I studied for 4 years and got an undergraduate degree in business. And then I did a postgraduate in the UK in London to become a primary school teacher, and then got my first teaching job in a school in West London. And I'll never forget it. It was the first day. I was in a year three classroom in front of 37-year-old kids. And about half an hour into my first day, I thought, I don't want to be a teacher. And like nearly instantly from moment one, day one. But it actually took me a while to make the transition into fitness, because I came home that Christmas and I had a little bit of a pity party for myself. I was so unhappy. I hated my job. I was getting real stuck in that sunk cost fallacy that I put so much time, energy, and money into this. I have to do it. You know, my family and friends all know this is my career choice. I feel like a failure if I don't. All that internal dialogue, all that story kind of moping around and mopping around in my head. And I remember I broke down that Christmas, like, because I hated London. I didn't feel particularly driven or fulfilled in what I was doing. And I broke down in front of my mum. God bless her soul. She's the best woman ever. Still my biggest fan to this day. And she was looking at me. And she asked me the question that actually made it into the new book, Rewriting Your Story, as Habit 6, give yourself a reason to jump out of bed every morning. And the question was, what would you do for free? And that was the first time, one, I realized that, okay, I'm not going to be excessively judged by the people around me if I make a different choice, which was huge. I was 24 years of age at the time and felt that I had the whole weight of the world on my shoulders. Again, first world problems, there's people going through so much more, but you're caught in this feeling that you're the only one experiencing these negative things. And, you know, it's ironic because now you realize that if you put your problem into a circle with a whole host of other people, you wouldn't be long taking your problems back, because it's all relative. But at the time, it felt like the worst thing in the world. And I sat there and I thought, I would work in a gym for free. I was like, if I was cleaning the floor in a gym, I'd be happy. I was like, I've always loved fitness. It's my hobby. It's my passion. And I don't want to be teaching anymore. And to cut a very long story short, I went back to London that January. I signed up to a level 2 fitness instructor course, the most basic instructor course you can get. And I had the exact opposite feeling on day one that I had when I was a teacher. I remember thinking, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And the analogy that I've used in books is, it felt like my ladder was up against the right wall. Yeah. When I was teaching, it felt like I was spending years against the ladder, but it was against the wrong wall and I was climbing the wrong ladder. And fitness felt like the opposite. And then fast forward, that was 13 years ago now at this point. I've been able to do some incredible things. Like, my books have sold, more than 600,000 copies at the time of recording. We've got a large social media platform. My main podcast, the Brian Keane podcast, is one of the largest health podcasts in the world. I've got the online business podcast where I work and help entrepreneurs, very similar to you, Matt, when it comes to performance and online business, health, wellness, fitness, etc. And I get to do things that I still would do for free to this day. But it started as a primary school teacher, and the old adage that, the seeds of failure planting the tree for future success is very applicable and true here. But it kind of got me to where I am. So yeah, a little bit of a different backstory into the world of kind of health and fitness. But again, it's led to a business that I never want to retire from. That's a big approach, and I know you're on my podcast and we'll be chatting about this in a couple of weeks, but building a business you don't want to retire from has become a mantra and a philosophy for me, and that's what I try and instill in others, so that they're building something that really means something to them, that the money will flow and it will come as a proxy and as a byproduct of living a life of purpose and doing what you love and serving people in the right way and pulling out your story and storytelling with your marketing and having a clear core offer and making sure those two things are connected with the bridge, and then the finances, the revenue, the money comes from that. But again, it all comes from that place of service, and it took me a while to get there, but thankfully over the last 7-8 years, again, after going broke twice, which is a whole other story in itself that we can get into, success number 3 has been pretty good.
You touched upon there the phrase sunk cost fallacy, and I know you touched upon what that means, but I wondered if you could go a little bit deeper. You said there, day one in that job, you knew it wasn't for you, but it was around 4 years until you decided to make the jump. And there'll be lots of people listening to this now that identify with that idea of knowing they're in the wrong place, that it doesn't fulfill them, it doesn't light them up. However, they still have that worry of what will people think of me and so on. I think it's a very different thing between hearing it on a podcast and logically, intellectually going, that makes sense, but emotionally and physically making that change and having the courage to do that is something different. Would you just go a bit deeper on that and give advice to people, really, if they are feeling like, I know I shouldn't be doing this, but I don't know how to take that leap? What would you say to them?
That was me, Matt. That's why it took so long. It's a great question, because that was literally my mindset at the time. It wasn't sunk cost fallacy for those 4 years. The sunk cost fallacy came in the early stages. The sunk cost fallacy of throwing good money after bad time after good. Like, for anyone that's been in a bad relationship or a job they hate, you stay in it because, well, I've been in it for so long. I've worked at this company for 5 years. I have to stay here. I've done this degree. I have to work in this job. I've been in this relationship for 6 years, although I've been miserable for 5.5. That's sunk cost fallacy. That's staying and doing something because it's what you've always done. And there's a lot of...
It's familiar, right? Even though it's not enjoyable, it's familiar, it's safe, it's certainty.
It's interesting, without going into too much of a tangent, there's a famous line from the psychologist Alain de Botton that we seek out what's familiar for us, not what's good for us, when it comes to things like romantic relationships. And I think it's very true when it comes to other areas of life too. And for me, those 4 years were all fear-based. In my second book, Rewire Your Mindset, I talk about this a little bit, that the analogy and the mindset and the mantra, feeling the fear and doing it anyways. But it took me so long to get to that point, because when I was working as a teacher, to be honest, some of it was earned fear, because I made an attempt to become a personal trainer and I did all the mistakes you can make. I got business cards, I got branded kit, I rented a gym, and I had no clients. The dumb taxes I paid, and I didn't focus on the things that were going to bring people in the door. I was looking the part without being the part. And because I couldn't get clients and didn't know how to get clients, I had that fear that got fed. The analogy of the two wolves. Which one do you fear? The one that's scared and afraid, or the one that feels like you have to go after the thing that you want? I was feeding the one that was fearful. And what happened then was I made 2 attempts, and the second attempt I went broke. The first time ever in my account, I wasn't in an overdraft in terms of I wasn't in the negative, but I went into a NatWest bank to try and take out £10. And you know this in the UK, if you don't have more than £10, you can't take out a £10 note. So I had £7.89 or whatever it was in the account, and I had to pay my rent that month, which was in West London, and I had gym rent to pay, and I didn't have a penny. I didn't have 2 of them to rub together, so I had to go down the back of my couch in West London. I was so afraid. I was living with 3 other teachers at the time, and I was like making sure none of them were around so they couldn't see me. I was going down the back of the couch looking for money and pennies and pounds that I could get the bus to go to NatWest to get an overdraft so that I could pay my rent for that month. And that was me done. I was out. I was like, I'm not doing this personal training. I'm not running this business. I'm out. This isn't something I can do. And just mind closed off. And just by a turn of events, I had to make ends meet. So I took a substitute teaching job in a school in West London. And one of the teachers who was in the classroom next to me came across about 3 weeks into my job and said, I heard you're a personal trainer. I'm getting ready for a wedding. I need to lose weight. It's in 6 months' time. And I was like, Zoe was her name. I was like, Zoe, that's not something I do anymore. I don't do that. I'm back teaching. I'm not doing that. And she goes, please. She goes, I'm too nervous to go to a gym. I know you. We get on. Would you please train me? And I said, okay, I'll train you in the park in Chiswick Park in London, but I'm not charging you. I was like, I can't charge you. I'm crap at this personal training thing. And long story short, after 3 sessions, I tweaked her nutrition slightly. We did a couple of workouts twice a week. And then after the third week, which would have been 5 sessions, she was like, I have to start paying you for this. She was like, look, I'm losing weight. I feel amazing. And it was in that moment I thought, and you'll get this, Matt, because you help people and serve them in such a meaningful way, and everybody that's listening here as well. I realized then that I wasn't a bad personal trainer. I was crap at business. And they are two completely different things, two completely different skill sets. It's like a plumber not being able to fix a light. Like an electrician fixes your lights, your plumber fixes your pipes. They're different skill sets. Running a business and being a personal trainer are two different skill sets you have to acquire. So straight away, I got a bit of confidence because I'm like, okay, you can't fix a problem that you've no awareness around. I'm like, it's business is my problem. I need to learn how to get clients. I don't need to necessarily, although I can keep learning how to serve people in a meaningful way with training sessions, nutrition, etc. That's not where my biggest true force multiplier is. It's learn the business side of things, learn about where the leads are coming from. How am I converting those leads? How am I providing the service that's getting me referrals and testimonies? And how is that going back into the top of the funnel? And then that became my focus and attention for the next several years. And it's interesting because the mindset at the time was all fear-based. I made the decision, and a practical tip, when I moved back to Ireland in 2014 and I moved back in with my mum and dad, my sister gave me her old little Toyota Yaris, one of those doors that when you close the front door too hard, all 4 windows fall down. And I didn't have any social media. I had no books. I had no podcasts, but my ladder was against the right wall. And I said, it was 2014, January 2014. I said, I'm going to give myself 6 months. And if I haven't made the personal training business work doing this full time, because for 2 years I was doing it part time. I was doing primary school teacher during the day, personal trainer in the gym and in the park, and classes at nighttime, holidays and weekends. And I said, by the time I left London, I was starting to make as much money as a personal trainer as I was as a teacher. And so that was a bit of a signal to me because, the money is the market. If you're making and serving people in a meaningful way, it's the currency that you're getting back from the universe, that you're actually providing something of value. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give this a go full time, but I'm not going to settle in London. This isn't going to be my home. I want to go back to the west of Ireland where I grew up. And I got into a gym, no clients, no books, no podcasts, no social media. I had none of this at this point. But what I did have was a couple of years experience as a personal trainer. So I was pretty good at my craft. And I said, I'll give myself 6 months. And if it's not working in 6 months, I'll go on the teaching registry and I'll get a job for September. That I gave myself that backup. I gave myself that plan B. And for me, the advice I offer when people are struggling with this, and it's not direct advice because it's what worked for me, but I didn't decide to even make personal training a full-time career or job until I was making nearly as much money as a trainer as I was as a teacher. That was me and my old scarcity mindset. We didn't have a lot of money when I was growing up, so I was very financially scarce at the time. And the second thing was I had a plan B. And there's a philosophy that if you focus on plan A, there's no need for plan B, but I needed a plan B. I need to know that in 6 months, if this doesn't work, I'm actually just going to be in the same position that I'm in now. And I put it in Rewire Your Mindset. It's one of my favorite lines. Something I still run myself through, Matt, is what would this look like if I knew I couldn't fail? That's just a thought experiment to run. Because that fear of failure is such a big thing. What would it look like? And for me, it's so funny because I get asked this question on podcasts when people go, did you think it would be the way it is now? Not even close. And I'd love to be like, I was a visionary. I knew I'd have the social media and the podcasts and the books. And yeah, I had this planned out. I didn't. I just didn't want to go back feckin' teaching. That was it. That was my only goal. I just didn't want to go back to be a teacher. And everything else would have been secondary after that. I'm like, if I'm not worried about money, great. But I don't mind being a little bit worried about money. I didn't make much money as a teacher. I'm fine not having an awful lot, but I just don't want to go back teaching. So that was it. And everything built and grew from there. And it was very natural because those 6 months were insane. Like I had to bring on other trainers underneath me to clear the waiting lists because of the results I was getting with my current batch of clients. And what started to happen then was I started to look at alternative revenue streams. And then 2014, 2015, I went into the world of fitness modeling at the time, bodybuilding competitions, purely as a business play. There wasn't a lot of people. There was nobody in the local area doing it. For me, I live in Galway in the west of Ireland, which is the opposite side to where Dublin is. There was nobody doing it. So I was using that to raise my profile, and it worked because I got a lot of 22, 23, 24-year-old guys who were like, I want to look like you. And so that led to waiting lists, which led me to bringing on other trainers, which made me train them up. And then they were in my ecosystem. So I could be in the gym training somebody for €100 an hour, and I'd have my coaches training them for €50 an hour. We were on a revenue split, and I'd have two coaches running, and I'd be making effectively €150 to €200 an hour when I was making €25 an hour 6 months before. And so it took off quite quickly from that point. And then in 2015, I started to dabble with online. My daughter was born in May 2015, and I wanted more freedom of time. And that shifted my priority. So I started to look into that. And then in 2016, we moved online completely and scaled from there. And then from 2016, everything is fed into that. The first book, The Fitness Mindset, the podcast we started at the end of 2016, the social media became a high level of priority in terms of where those leads were coming from. And it got to the point that it was just getting the right people in. Similar to now, I'm a square pegs into square holes coach. I work with people in business mentorship. I work with people in high ticket fitness coaching, but I don't have to work with any of them in either, because if I'm not a fit, I just tell people, look, I don't think it would be a good fit for whatever reason. Square pegs fit into square holes for a whole host of reasons. And that, because of the systems we built and the scalability of programs between royalties, scaled apps, we're building it out into an app now, programs, courses, etc. We have this luxury and leeway that we can say no to people. You can't do that in the growth phase. Right. You can do it in the scale phase. And it's important to know that, like a growing child, there's different phases of your business. In the growth phase, you have to say yes to everybody. You have to take everybody on. You also have to figure out who you can serve in the best way. You won't have that information until you've worked with X amount of people. But when you start to scale, you can start to say no. And that's where the real gold is, because you start attracting your tribe. You start really dialing in your vibe to attract that tribe. And then you're able to serve them in a more meaningful way, get them results, and then like normally refers like. So you've got referrals, testimonies built in, and then it just becomes this compound effect of positive people coming in terms of leads and inquiries that are a good fit, converting those, having a great service, loving who you're serving, getting referrals, testimonies, rinse and repeat.
I feel like I just need to take a moment to actually just say well done. I'm sure like everybody listening, like what an amazing, inspiring story. Just to hear, just a few minutes ago, you talked about that story, looking for money down the back of a couch, to what you've gone on to do is absolutely incredible and so inspiring to hear. There's a lot of people that work hard. There's a lot of people that know they want change. There's a lot of personal trainers that have done the business courses and they've learned about marketing and they've got clients paying them money. But the vast majority of them never go on to have a podcast like you've had, 4 best-selling books, the community you've built online, the business that you've had. As you reflect now on your journey, if you was to, as best as you can, try and break it into a formula, and I'm going to just caveat by saying I assume part of it is timing, and that's something like, we're not, if we're listening to this now and we want to do something similar, we've got to appreciate that this was a different time that you was building it in. But if you can give us as best as possible the tangible steps, formulas into why you versus so many other personal trainers or people with online businesses have got to where you have, what would you say some of the parts of the formula are?
That's a great question, Matt. I'll give you the actual formula that I use with people I work with. But before I do that, as you mentioned, the timing is a big thing. And I don't want to negate the role that luck played, because luck, again, there is the adage that preparation meeting the prepared mind is what luck is, but there is an element of luck. I hit it big on certain platforms. I was early to podcasting. I wasn't the first mover. There was others with arrows in their backs before me, but I was pretty early. Like I'm nearly 10 years doing the Brian Keane podcast. So it's been around for a while. So I was able to capture an audience quite early. The biggest secret, before I get into the framework, was I always listened to my audience, and I never, let me rephrase, because I've had a lot of business mistakes and failures, way more than successes. The only difference is that the successes have, it's venture capital style, the successes have more than paid for the failures. But one of the things that I've historically done is I've always used my audience to tell me what to create. And that can be tricky when you don't have an audience. But even if you've got 50 or 100 people following you, particularly if you have business accounts, Instagram, LinkedIn, podcast, newsletter, etc., they're following you for a reason. So they have a problem, they have a pain point. And I always ask them what they're struggling with. And not only do I use that to create all the content that I create, I also use it to create all the programs and all the courses. And because of that, it means that I'm not guessing. One of the things that surprises people, and I'll use the fitness mindset. That was my first book. And that was the real game changer for me. If we're reverse engineering hindsight bias, everything changed for me when that first book came out. Partly because I hybrid published it because I had a traditional deal, and just by pure luck or crook, it got pulled from me, and none of the other publishers would take it. I pitched it to 15 or 16 publishers. Nobody would take it. And they were like, look, no one's going to read a book around fitness and mindset. No one's written a book like that. No one's going to read it. They were really nice replies, but they were basically, no, we don't want that. And I said, okay, I've written this book. The first section is all fitness, so nutrition, training, sleep, all the stuff you would expect in a fitness book. The second section is all mindset, staying on track, not self-sabotaging, etc. The stuff my clients were struggling with. And at the time when I wrote the book, and I believe everyone has a book in them, especially for business, in terms of like serving your community, even if only 10 people buy it, they could be 10 clients that pay you 50 grand a year. You could literally make, €1 million, pound, dollars on a book if it gets in front of the right people in terms of the avatar. But that's a different story, which I can get into later if you decide to go down that path. But I wrote that book thinking, if it helps my clients, this will be a success. So they always say, write your book to one person. So I would think about my clients, my avatar in my mind, which was a culmination of several clients. And I wrote the book to those people. But what I also did was I crowdsourced the writing of that book. So Facebook was organic in 2016. And I would put all the chapters of the book on Facebook. And the things that got the most likes, comments, and shares, I rewrote, and put into the final version of the book. So, and I always use the example, there's a section in there on anxiety that I never would have dreamed would have made it into a book. I was like, who cares what a fitness guy has to say about mental health and anxiety? I had a section about insulin sensitivity and insulin resistance, and the anxiety post got thousands of likes, comments, and shares. And the insulin sensitivity resistance got 3 or 4. And if I was going off my opinion, I would have gone with the insulin sensitivity section of the book. So I crowdsourced the writing of that in terms of the feedback. And then when the book released, it got a flywheel effect very quickly because it was short. I wrote a fitness book for people who don't read books. At the time, I'm a huge reader now, but at the time I was only starting to get into reading, and I was writing to my avatar, to my client base, people who don't really read books. So it's short, it's snappy, it's a 3.5-hour audio book. You can get through it quite quickly. So people were finishing it and then passing it on. And then people were buying their own copy and people were reviewing it. And it started to have this flywheel effect. And it's spent 16 weeks on the Amazon bestseller list, to the point that bookstores reached out to get copies directly. And then it hit the bestseller list in the bookstores it went into. So I was selling these €15 books that I was paying €2 for. So I was making €14, €15 if there was a markup to 17 or 18 in stores on these books. So it gave me financial choices because I made a lot of money quite quickly on those books. So I was able to say no to a lot of things. But what it also did was it brought in really high quality leads, people who wanted to work with me because they decided I was the person they wanted to work with. I'd never had that before. Before that, it was always a mini pitch. You talk to them and you'd pitch them what you could do, and you'd kind of hope that they'd work with you. That all went away when the book. It was people going, "I want to work with you. What's your program? How do I work with you? I've read the book. I want to work with you."
Do you think
So
the book's a bit of a superpower then for anyone that's building a personal brand business, that it's almost like almost a must if they want to go to that next level?
yes, it's kind of what I think. The book does all the heavy lifting for you. Like if you think about it very logically, like your book is the thing that's out there. Like it's so funny because like I run Facebook ads, Instagram ads, and I'm a big person with that. I do it with my mentees and people. But Facebook ads takes money out of my pocket to put money into my pocket. A book puts money into my pocket to put more money into my pocket. And it's really interesting. It's literally the reason why I write more books, because it does the heavy lifting on the front end. It not only educates people with how you work, but the philosophy. But if somebody's getting value from that, we're all like this. The next logical step is, how do I work with that person? This book has helped me. I need help with the execution, the accountability, or just I like that person. I like the cut of their jib. That's the person I want to work with. So that's huge. And if that's all it does, it can be a real driver for business. And I don't want to like paint any false picture here, because if you go, I've done a traditional book as well, and the royalties are rubbish. Like, they're terrible. It's like €1, €2 copy. The royalties are terrible. But again, it has a certain prestige, opens up doors that you mightn't previously open with a self-published book or a hybrid published book. I've done all three. I've done self-published, hybrid, and traditional. So I've got probably more experience than most when it comes to the different approaches based on first-hand experience. But it's definitely a superpower, and it can open doors that would previously remain closed to you, but also it does the heavy lifting. A podcast is actually very similar. I'm a big podcast person for your niche or for your market, because a podcast does your heavy lifting for you. If you're creating episodes around your philosophy as a coach, instantly you're either repelling or attracting the right person. Yeah. And it's working for you while you're sleeping. There's a big thing in business, make money while you sleep. But the first step of that is get leads while you sleep. That's the first step on that framework. And getting leads while you sleep, that's already pre-qualified from something that you've created once that people are consuming regularly. It gives you back so much of your time, so you can focus on the coaching, focus on the higher level. And just to tie it together then, Matt, and I know I'm speaking loads, so I apologize, so we can bounce back and forth, but the framework is your core offer tied with your story. So something I'm big on is storytelling in your marketing. Ideally, if you're your avatar and you're doing something publicly like we are, like I am, like you are, you're using your story and pulling out your story and the things that you struggle with to connect with people and dial into your core offer. That's the secret sauce. If you think of a bridge, your core offer is here. Let's say it's your high ticket coaching or your membership or your scale program. Pulling out your story, the thing that you struggled with, and the bridge in between your content, your podcast, your Instagram reels, your blog posts, your email list. All that is just a bridge between the story you're pulling out and the core offer, and rinse and repeat. And then it comes into that funnel I talked about earlier, your inquiries, your leads, with your conversions. How are you converting them? How are you providing the service or the product, whatever it is you're selling? Where are your testimonies and referrals coming from? And then back into the top. That's the entire framework.
It's so funny because I know there's a few people on watching now that I've had one-to-one sessions with today, and we spoke about the exact same thing. When it comes to your content, it's about using storytelling, and it's about making it relatable. And the best way you make it relatable is it be a real life example that you've lived through, that people can go, oh my God, as if you've gone through that, like I've gone through that. And I think it's such a key thing. I think I see it a lot on social media when people are just going, here's 3 tips to do this and 3 steps to do that. And actually, one of the things I said to one of the clients today is, meet your audience where they're at, right? When people come to social media, are they in the mindset of, I just want you to tell me why I'm doing everything wrong with my life and how to improve it and sell me a course? Like, that's not the mindset we go to social media. Often we go to social media because we're having a stressful day, we're procrastinating, we want something to distract us, we want to watch cat videos, right? Now, I'm not saying like you got to get a cat, but it's that thing of meet them where they're at. And if you can give them something intriguing and interesting that doesn't sound like you're preaching, and actually just tell them an interesting real story, people go, oh shit, what happened to Brian there? I didn't realize that, right? And is that kind of part of what you're saying there about the story and your core offer? Lead with that story.
And it doesn't have to be your story. That's the interesting thing, because, and I've worked with, and very similar to you, Matt, I'm sure it's the same. I've worked with people who are like, I don't want to put myself forward. on social. I don't want to tell my story,
Right.
and
Yeah.
that's okay. But you can story tell from your clients. Like storytelling 101 is don't be the hero of the story, be the guide on the side. That's storytelling 101. Every movie you've ever watched and enjoyed, Yoda
Mm.
and Luke Skywalker, you know, Dumbledore, Harry Potter, like you're not Harry Potter, you're Dumbledore. You're not Luke Skywalker, you're Yoda, you're the guide on the side. And so you can position your clients and you can position people who have the same problem as other potential customers and then highlight them and story tell through that. So yes, I'm big on pulling out your personal story. You're trying to build a personal brand, which is like your moat. Warren Buffett regularly talks about a moat around a business so that people can't just copy what you're doing. Your moat is your personal brand and your story. You can't out Matt Hall, Matt Hall. You can't out Brian Keane, Brian Keane. You can't out Zoe Jessica, Zoe Jessica. You can't outdo somebody else. And people say this always because in the fitness industry, you've got your James Smith, you've got your Joe Wicks. Two great people, had both of them on the podcast, two great guys doing their thing. You can't out Joe Wicks, and you can't out James Smith. But yet people try to be carbon copies of the people they look up to. And by all means, take inspiration from the people that you admire, but put your spin on it because you're the only one who's lived your life. So if you're trying to build a personal brand where people have your name as the top of mind when they're looking for a program or a course or someone to work with, lean into your story and pull it out because we think that our story is boring because we've lived it. But everybody has their own version of this. They have gone through trials and tribulations and successes. And in nearly every case, you know this, Matt, from hosting a podcast. I'm the same with the Brian Keane podcast. Actually, in the online business podcast, I know I've got you on in a couple of weeks. When you see the success, there's always seeds of failure planted for that seeds of success. Always, nearly always, that tree of success is planted with seeds of failure. And sometimes we forget that. And that can be the bridge that draws people closest to us. Like we buy from people who we like, know, and trust. And if you're hearing all the success stories and all the highlight reels, that's all well and good. That's important. I'm not saying, because I've seen people do the opposite where they're like talking about all the bad times. I'm like, look, you need the good times to be reference points. Otherwise, those bad times just sound like you're moaning and you don't have your shit together. So the contrast is important and making sure that you've got it in the right order. But share the successes, but also the trials and tribulations. Show everything. Like when you're the Wizard of Oz, I was watching Wicked with my daughter at the weekend. Like you're the sweaty man behind the curtain. You're not the Wizard of Oz. Like social media can be that bridge. Podcasts can be that bridge. Books can be that bridge. They show everything for what it truly is and who you are. That's what draws people to you. And that's a very powerful thing. That's pull marketing versus push marketing. Like I have the biggest business ache ever with cold DMs. People are like, I can, build your business to 7 and 8 figures in the next 3 months. I'm like, well, one, you don't know what I'm making now because you've done no research. And I was like, no, you fucking can't, because you wouldn't be DMing me and reach out if you could. Like you wouldn't be cold DMing. And there's nothing wrong. There's a time and a place for that style. I don't like it. It gives me the ick. I think it's more important to try and lead with service. Like even if you're cold DMing, at least reach out and be like, look, what are you struggling with? How can I help?
Yeah. Like make it a genuine conversation. Like the best is like I got the other day, which was, hi Matt, I think you're doing some really good work with insert podcast. And it hadn't
I get those too.
It hadn't even, you're just like, oh, this is a good start.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really good advice. I want to talk a little bit about health and fitness as well, because obviously that's a massive part of what you do, what you have done. And I also believe our relationship with health and fitness can change throughout different seasons, different experiences as we're learning. And I'm interested for you as somebody that's helped many people and coached this stuff. Is there some key fundamental things perhaps that you would have said maybe 10 years ago when you started being a coach that was good advice that maybe you've changed your opinion on today and that you wouldn't say is good advice today?
Specifically for health and fitness or specifically for business or both?
Let's do health and fitness.
Yeah. I've changed my mind about a lot with health and fitness. Like one of my favorite lines, I think it's Richard Feynman or Charles Darwin, I can't remember, but like one of the years that you haven't given up one of your best loved ideas is a wasted year. And so I'm always trying to kind of reevaluate things that are really loved ideas for me and making sure that I'm not confirming my own bias and constantly consuming things that just support my thought already. Charlie Munger's got a great line that you should be able to argue the opinion of somebody who has the opposite opinion to you better than they can argue it themselves. And I think that gives you a kind of a power of perspective. It also, I think, makes me a better coach because you tend to be more open-minded. So in the last decade, I think the podcast has been a superpower for this because it shortened that learning curve. When I was a coach, a lot of personal trainers make this mistake. And I think the ones that are listening here will probably get this too. Because something works for you, you tend to do the same thing with your clients.
Right. Yeah.
That's a big thing with personal trainers. So when I started first, even in 2014, when I was doing this full time, I was a carb cycling guy and I was a big circuit time under tension giant set guy. So by proxy, that's what I did with most of my clients. But like a square peg into a square hole, that worked great for the square pegs, terrible for the round pegs. So I didn't have enough tools in my arsenal at the time to make adjustments to that. Whereas now, when I work with people, and I still do some high ticket coaching for one to one in terms of fitness, when I look at somebody, I come in with a blank slate and I ask, what's the goal? What are you looking to do with your health and fitness? Build strength, build muscle, lose body fat, tone up, get stronger, get fitter, get faster, etc. I'll ask what the goal is. I will ask, what has worked in the past that you enjoyed? What has worked in the past that you hated? And have you ever got to this goal before? Straight away, when it comes to fitness and nutrition, that's going to give me 80% of the information I need in terms of what I can do as a plan for a baseline foundational plan. And then after that, I can course correct and adjust. So now I've got clients who will do keto. Someone else will be on intermittent fasting. Someone else will be vegan. Someone else will be carnivore. Somebody else will be whole foods. Someone else will track calories. Someone else will be on giant sets. Someone else will be doing high rock. Someone else is training for a marathon. Somebody else is doing calisthenics. Somebody else is doing step counts and HIIT workouts. I used to map and try and fit the client into what I thought worked. Now I try and fit what works into the client, if that makes sense. That was a big shift for me over the last 10 years. And because of the podcast, and speaking to some of the leading experts in physiology, in nutrition, in exercise science, in programming, not to mention successful entrepreneurs and coaches who are doing this, it started to make me question the beliefs I had because I started to see all these different things working for different people. And because of that, it made, like, one of the reasons that I'm very lucky, the Brian Keane podcast is a huge podcast. It's massive. I mean, we've got like awareness now that most of the big guests come to me and they pitch to the show, which is an amazing position to be in. A bit of first mover, as I mentioned, but again, you have to put yourself in the position by showing up consistently every week. You know this with your podcast as well. And what that has done is I would have kept that even if people weren't listening, assuming guests would still come on, because it made me a better coach. It meant that because I read books before they come on. Like I do a lot of research before I bring on big guests. So not only have I read their book and consumed whatever their expertise is, I then get to ask them questions on those expertise, which enhances my knowledge as a coach, which feeds back into a better service, which leads to more of a waiting list, which leads to a price increase, because that's how price works. Price is based on supply and demand. You've got 5 slots, 10 slots, 20 slots. As soon as it's filled, price goes up. Like that's the whole marketing. And then you just keep pushing the price until you hit the ceiling. And then you either keep the price at that point, or you go into a different market who have more disposable income that can afford the price. You decide. It's up to you then at that point. You can literally master the business and maneuver in any way you like. And then you just rinse and repeat that.
I feel like we've just started and I want to talk to you like all night. Like I'm just like, can we just stay on? But I'm aware of the time and I'm aware we need to make some time for the Q&A with the members as well. So I'm just going to dive into now some of the general questions that I ask all guests. So the first question is, what is some of the best advice you've received and why?
Make it exist and make it perfect is one of the best pieces of business advice I ever got. I have a lot of issues and problems and things I struggle with in business, but execution is never one of them. Actually, it's a little bit the opposite. I've shiny object where I'll try and execute on too many things at once, and then I'll bite off more than I can chew, learn to chew faster, and then end up choking. So that's what ends up happening to me. But a lot of people struggle with the execution. So make it exist first and then make it perfect. So even now, we've redesigned and taken our entire scale program that historically was built through our website and automated and moved it into an app. And when we launched the beta program, founding members program, it's not perfect yet, but in 6-7 months it will be. But it needs to exist before it can be perfect. So that's been really helpful advice for me.
It reminds me of Rob Moore's book title, Start Now, Get Perfect Later. It's the
Yeah.
same kind of principle, and it's a really good one to remember because everybody's always waiting to be good enough, perfect, qualified enough to just start. And actually, you get those things as a result of starting. So I love that. All right, flip side is what's some terrible advice that was maybe well meaning, but now you would say that was awful advice?
I won't say it was awful advice, but I'd say it was very misaligned advice. I actually have several awful advices which I can give to. I will give those as well, kind of catchphrases at the end. But the advice I got was from one of my first mentors, and she ran a multiple seven-figure health business in the US. She was married to one of my best friends at the time. Genius woman in terms of business. And her advice to me was never make your clients your friends. She was like, your friends are your friends and your clients are your clients. And I get where she was coming from, but one of the things I do, I probably shouldn't be saying this publicly on a podcast, but one of the things I do with one-to-one coaching and business mentorship is I hop on a 15-minute call before I decide if I'm working with somebody. And what's really interesting is prices have been sent over before that, deliverables have been sent over before that. So the person that's on the call has already decided they want me as their coach or their mentor. I'm hopping on that 15-minute call to make sure there's someone I want to work with. And that, because my filter is, if I don't think we'd be friends or I don't think I can help them, I won't work with them. They're my two filters. Ideally, it's both. And it's been something that served me even as a one-to-one trainer before I moved online, because a lot of my clients became friends. And it ends up actually being a weird secret sauce that I didn't understand at the time, because one, they stay with you longer because they love working with you, and then the goals change. It's not codependent. They're staying because they want to, not because they need to. You should never have a codependent relationship with your clients. But they would also send so many referrals and family members and friends because you had this relationship, you had this friendship built up. And it's weird because it's something I never thought would scale, but it does scale. It does scale, particularly if you're kind of going more high ticket and you're working with a handful of people, because a lot of my referrals and leads are coming from other people who I've worked with, who I'm now friends with. And it was very well-meaning advice. And in some contexts in business, I'm sure it is. And it, again, I've said this to my other half, like when she's working with clients and she's like, oh, it's awkward asking for payment and stuff like that. And, we should keep the relationship friend versus client. When I argue, well, that's your system that's broken. That's actually your payment system that's broken. You should have boundaries in place around this. That's not an issue with the person you've chosen to work with or them with you. I was like, that's an issue with your boundaries. That's a completely different thing, a different problem you need to fix. Like, if you have a headache, you're not taking an antacid. You to make sure you're fixing the symptom for the correct problem. And that is something that was very well meaning. Bad advice I got. I had oh Jesus. I'm so big on doing your due diligence with the people you work with. Everyone that's in the membership listening here, Matt's a great guy there to help you, serve you in a meaningful way. I try and do the same with the people I'm with, but there's a lot of wankers out there who will literally promise you the sun, the moon, and the stars because they want your money and they're not a fit. And one of the advice I got, because I spent, I think it was nearly 15 grand on a mentor that I ended up cutting short and never got my money back because they took me on when they shouldn't have taken me on. But one of them was to hard sell everybody, which I get it. It kind of comes back to the cold DMs. He was like, everyone that inquires, he was like, you pitch them and you sell them. He was like, you have a quota, you pitch, you sell. And I remember asking one of the questions on a call. I felt like such an idiot. I remember asking the question, I'm like, but what if I can't help them? And he said, it doesn't matter, get the money and figure it out. And I was like, oh, ick. And that obviously didn't work. That's what I call a dumb tax. But I always tell people to do your due diligence beforehand. I got several pieces of advice similar, but that's something that was really misaligned for me. I don't think you should work with everybody. I don't think you should sell everybody. I think you should sell the people who you can genuinely serve. I think you're actually doing a disservice to not sell them when you can actually make their life better or their business better in a meaningful way. It's also a disservice to not sell the correct people. But equally, when you can't help somebody or they're not a fit, you should be the first person who's like, actually, I'm not a fit, but I actually know someone who might be, and then you put them in touch. Law of attraction is a big thing. Karma is a big thing. That will come back to you. So yeah, again, long-winded answer, I know, but
no, it's great. And interestingly, just a really quick side note on that, it just made me reflect because I've had two similar experiences where I've paid thousands of pounds, where have had similar things, where they've had similar methodologies that have not aligned with me, and they shouldn't have, agreed to take me on because we weren't a good fit. And then I was thinking, there's been many other people that I've interviewed on this podcast with similar stories, and I think there's a side thing there about just because you find a mentor and it doesn't work out and you don't get your money back, it's that willingness to still keep looking for a mentor and not just saying the whole industry's a scam and all mentors are bad, because presumably you've still gone on to work with other mentors, right?
Best investment I ever made. One of my mentors, I worked with Elliot Hulse. So Elliot was used to be a big YouTuber. And I remember at the time, it was 2015, I was trying to move online. And the analogy, and I'm sorry to cut across you, Matt, but you got me super excited with that answer because it's so important to paint the other side. That I remember in 2015, I was doing really well financially and it was a big investment for me at the time. I remember it was all the money I had in my bank account, but there was more money coming in. I wasn't going broke because it was a big investment. There was more money from clients, but it literally wiped me out at the time. And I went over to London. It was a 4-day intensive mentorship in terms of him and his team. And I went over there with what I can only describe as like a 95% loading bar. And then I came back and then he would say something or his team would say something and I go, oh my God, boom. 100%. Oh my God, zoom, 100%. And I came back, best investment I ever made. Best investment I ever made because I had that money made back within the first 2 months and then it was an infinite return on investment after that. So good mentors, good coaches are literally, it's free money. If you're talking about from purely a financial, don't even talk about wasting time, energy and effort. But from a financial standpoint, it's an amazing investment. But there are a lot that aren't a fit. So it's just being mindful of the economy or the comparison between the two.
All right, next question is a little bit of a vulnerable one because I think a lot of time when we listen to podcasts like this, the guest that we listen to, we can put on a bit of a pedestal because they've achieved all these great things. And I think it's important that we remind everybody that you're still human. So if you're happy to answer it, the question is, what is something you're struggling with right now? And how are you managing that or working through it?
I'm really struggling at the minute as somebody that wrote a chapter in my second book about how to saying no to things at the minute, which is very ironic. Now, it's a slightly different saying no because I'm in a position of a reframe that, I'm drowning in opportunity because the things I'm saying yes to are very cool things that are coming my way, but they're still bandwidth. And ultimately, and I love my business, I've building and have built a business I don't want to retire from. That's a big philosophy for me. But sometimes when it takes too much energy from me and it pulls me away from my daughter, pulls me away from my girlfriend, pulls me away from my family, pulls me away from things that are really important to me, it makes me feel slightly out of balance and misaligned. And something I've been struggling with is that I realize now, and April will be my last yes season. And then for June, July, August, until I reevaluate in September, I'm going to start shifting into a no season where things are going to be a no. But it took me a few sleepless nights, some digestive issues, some questioning of what's going on. Why do I feel this way? And I've just overcommitted. I've literally, again, bitten off more than I can chew, trying to chew faster and choking myself. And I've created that problem. And most problems we create in our business, we've created ourselves, or we haven't built the systems or the boundaries to help that. I am struggling with that at the minute, but it might not answer it directly, but I'm in the process of fixing it.
Right. And I think that's interesting for everybody to hear that even the man who wrote a chapter on it, we can still make mistakes. We're not perfect, but it's the self-awareness to check in with yourself and then maybe read your own book.
Yeah, it's 100%. As soon as I finish this now, right, rewire your mindset. I'm going to jump straight that chapter. Yeah.
And the other thing I would just want to say is, Helen, thank fuck we booked him in this month and not next month. We'd have definitely missed out. This has been amazing. Last couple of questions before we go to the Q&A. There's a question I always ask, which this show is about helping people live happier, healthier, and more fulfilled lives. So if you was to give 3 pieces of advice that you believe would mean that everybody is on the right sort of path to living a happier, healthier, and a fulfilled life, what would you say those pieces of advice would be?
Spend time with people who nourish you instead of deplete you. Number 1. You could also apply that to your business. Try and spend more time doing things that you can be nourished by than depleted by. In your business specifically, but probably in life as well, separate your drudgery zone and your desire zone, things that you love to do and things that you hate to do. Try and spend 80% of your time, your Pareto principle, in your desire zone, and in your drudgery zone, the things you hate to do, either automate, eliminate, or delegate the things in that zone. And 3, don't try and give from an empty cup. And that encompasses your sleep, your nutrition, your training, your movement, your relationships, your business, everything. But if you're trying to give from an empty cup, you're not going to be able to serve anybody. You're not going to be able to be the mother, father, husband, wife, brother, sister, girlfriend, boyfriend that you want to be. You're not going to show up at a high enough frequency or vibration to help the people that you can genuinely help. So make sure that you're not giving from an empty cup.
Brian, thank you, man. This has been outstanding. I'm just so grateful for your time, for your wisdom, for your experience. That's been one of the fastest hours of my life. I'm massively inspired by you. If people are just hearing about you for the first time, how can they check you out? Where's the best to follow you? And do you want to just plug the book? We didn't even speak about your most recent book. So I'd love you to just, 20 seconds or so, just let people know about that and then, where to get it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Matt. This has been great. I actually might go a little bit longer if you're okay to go another 2 minutes, because I think it's important based on the second last question you asked about that low points. The last book, which ties it all together, I think, Rewriting Your Story, is a very interesting book for me, because when I was writing that book, it was finished 18 months ago. And I went through a really bad breakup. I was supposed to get married. And when that book came out, broke me. The breakup broke me into a million different pieces. And there was large sections of that book that had mentioned my other half at the time, and that had mentioned things that we had done. And when I went back to edit it, the words on the page started to find me again. And I wrote it in the epilogue about that dark night of the soul, because I struggled a lot. My dad, who thankfully is healed from cancer at the time, but was very sick, and it felt like everything was coming, and everything was just, life had got too hard, and I was questioning if I was strong enough to manage it and deal with it. And when I started to go back and edit that book, the words found me again. The power of the book is called Rewriting Your Story, and the 7 habits to transform the narratives and the stories that hold you back. And I got stuck in a very disempowering mindset and narrative at the time of, I don't think I can handle this. I don't think I can do this. I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. I felt so lost. And I started to read the words I had written 2 years before, and they found me again. And then I was able to edit that book and go back on it. And it's really interesting when you're a content creator, whether it's a book or a podcast or social media, and you're being authentic. And I share my struggles. Like, I still showed up and did podcasts, and there was days when I would fucking bawl and cry after because I was depressed, and then I'd have to go home to my daughter and try and cheer up and not let it impact her. And it felt really hard, and it felt really difficult. And it's worth knowing that unless you share it, people are always going to be going through struggles and difficulties, and we're going to see the highlight reel. You'll see my social media and bringing a group of people up Kilimanjaro, or best-selling books, or podcast doing great, or revenue, etc. But ultimately, unless it's shared, you're not going to see the struggles people are going through. And I think, as a call to action, when you've worked through your stuff, your mess becomes your message. And the things that you think make you weak actually make you really strong. And if you can connect that and share it back with people, it's going to connect and resonate with them. And that vibration is going to attract the right people into you. So not only is it going to help your business from a financial and business side, like we've talked about in this whole podcast, it's also the right thing to do. And the karma comes back to you. And the struggles are real, but your mess becomes your message. And when you're going through a difficult time, if you're listening to this podcast or you're on the membership, keep going. I love that Winston Churchill quote, and it became my brain tattoo for 7, 8, 9 months. When you're going through hell, keep going. And whether it's a failed business launch, a breakup, a divorce, grief, death of a loved one, just something in life that's knocked you back, just keep going and know that your mess can become your message. So there's beauty in everything. not always in the success, not always in the good stuff. And in a lot of cases, it's the pressure that makes diamonds. And that's the thing that's ultimately going to make you serve and show up the way you need to show up. So just keep that in mind going forward.
Man, yeah, that was really powerful. Thank you so much, Brian. That was absolutely amazing. And do go check out the book. I'm assuming it's available on Amazon and all the usual stuff, right? If people want to get that, and they can follow you. Do you want to just give your handle for like Instagram and stuff like that as
Yeah.
well?
Yeah, it's Brian_Keane_fitness, like similar to you. That's the one place you can get me directly. Everything else goes to you've got Helen, I've got Clive. Everything else goes back to the assistants. But I'm on Instagram DM myself. That's the one thing I check myself.
Great. Amazing. Do go check out Brian, everybody. Give him a follow, check out his content, and go get the book. Brian, before we head over to the Q&A with the members, my final question is, what is your personal definition of success?
Love that question. I can swear on this podcast, but I need to give context. Is that my daughter doesn't think that I'm a dickhead, but I need to give context to that, because I can get very out of balance and I can get very obsessed with things, fitness, business, etc. And there's a line by William C. Clement that don't forget the flowers at your feet when you're reaching for the moon. And I always think about that because I want to achieve great things, same as everybody that's listening to this, but I also don't want to neglect the things that are really important to me. And Robin Sharma, who wrote The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, amongst other several great books, he's been on my podcast, a wonderful, wonderful human being. But he has a line that, who will cry when you die? And I always think about that with success, that I can have the books, the physical achievements, the fitness competitions and races and business. But ultimately, if my family don't think I was a good person, and my daughter, although she loves me because she has to, thinks I'm a bit of a dickhead, it's all for naught. And that becomes my North Star with making decisions, because if it's going to come at the long-term impact of neglecting or negatively impacting that relationship, it doesn't get done. So my North Star is probably different to a lot of people, but it's very clear and authentic for me. And that's what success looks like versus the revenue drivers or the fitness achievements or the books, because they're all amazing and great, and they massively stroke your ego and all these great things that come with it, and opens up doors and opportunities. But ultimately, it's not what's important. So I want to make sure that that relationship is strong always. And if she grows up confident, strong in herself, knows who she is, that's what success looks like for me, which is a crap answer for a business podcast, but it's true.
It's not. It's a great answer. And at the same time, you said the word obsessed. The level of success you've had when it comes to books, revenue, social media, and so on, do you believe there's an element of obsession that has to be in place to get to those heights of business success?
I did once. I don't now.
What about at the beginning when you were there with £2?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you're right. The obsession is definitely what got me from 0 to 1.
Right.
But I was driven by a lot of negativity during that time. I was driven by a lot of, I didn't get an awful lot of support. My mum was a massive fan. My sister was, but I didn't get an awful lot of support from family members and friends because I was going off a beaten path. So I had a lot of negativity fueling me for those 5 a.m. sessions, getting up, training clients, taking a nap, taking more clients. That fueled me. And that obsession was it's definitely helpful. To say that type A obsessiveness isn't helpful would be a massive lie. But what you don't want is external success fueled by internal turmoil. That's something you want to try and avoid. So if you can get the obsession to work for you, I always think of it like ambition. The analogy I use and the metaphor I use for ambition is it's like having a pet tiger. Ambition's an amazing thing to have. Having a pet tiger would be fucking deadly, but it could rip your face off if you're not mindful of it. Ambition is the same. You can have great ambition, but if you have obsessive ambition, you can get your face ripped off, i.e. figuratively losing the things that are around you that are actually valuable. So to say that it's not important, and there's times that I will check in with that obsessiveness. If I'm writing a book, I go into monk mode. I'm in writing mode. I get it done. I just make sure it's not coming at the cost of other things during that time. That took me several years to get to that point. I'm not going to lie, but it was definitely serving at one point. It's just, an old story, that there was things that it helped me to believe in Santa Claus when I was 7. It's less helpful when you're 37. Like, it was grand to split food into good and bad categories when you were 10, but it's not helpful if you're 27, 28, 38. trying to lose body fat. It's just it's a minimized mindset, and sometimes the things that helped you once upon a time don't help you anymore. And if you're in a new season of life, just look at it in non-judgment. You wouldn't look at a tree and give out to a tree for losing its leaves in autumn. Sometimes you're in a different season of life and you need to change the thing that got you to where you are, and that's okay.
I'm so glad I selfishly broke my own rule and asked an extra question. Brian, thank you so much. That was absolutely amazing. I really, really appreciate that.
Mate, my pleasure.